lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be discussing Keeper, which was released November 14th, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Now, Rowan, just earlier this year, we discussed a new Osgood Perkins movie that featured, yes, a killer monkey with a snare drum, but also an after-credit tease for yet another Osgood Perkins movie releasing later that year. For those of us who didn't overly enjoy the sort of zany gonzo gore fest that was The Monkey, this other movie seemed to be a little bit stripped back, restrained, and ultimately creepier. This movie, of course, was soon revealed to be Keeper, and I'm wondering if some 9 months after it was first revealed, if you were still looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was definitely looking forward to it. I mean, I think I was on the Long Legs episode, but I enjoyed Long Legs, and I think when we did The Monkey, I was a fan of The Monkey. I've seen it again since it came out, and I enjoyed it on a second watch as well. So I'm always very interested in what Osgood Perkins is kind of up to. I know we've had the conversations, I think, before about how he's kind of like, whether rightfully so, like included in names of like some big time like horror directors of current times that he's kind of like, people seem to think he's like knocking on that door or definitely cohorts with those people, whether that's true or not. So, yeah, I guess all that to say that, yeah, I was still pretty pumped about seeing what he had cooked up for this. What about you?
Yeah, as I sort of said in the little blurb there, The Monkey was one of those movies that it worked for me in some respects, but it was just kind of too over the top and too silly and too campy by the end of it that it kind of lost me. And similarly so, Long Legs I thought was pretty great for probably about 70 to 80% of the runtime, and then that's another movie that kind of lost me in the third act. So Osgood Perkins is one of those filmmakers where I enjoy a lot of what he's doing aesthetically. I like oftentimes kind of this mood or tone that he conjures throughout a lot of the movie. It's just he always kind of goes a step too far and loses me. But with that said, Tatiana Maslany was one of the strongest parts of The Monkey for me, even though she was in it just, it wasn't a cameo, but I mean, she probably had like 10 minutes screen time, if that. So seeing a movie where she was going to be the lead was very interesting to me. I'm someone who I first discovered her with Orphan Black years ago when I actually used to watch television. And I just wanted to see her kind of lead this sort of horror movie. And this is one of those that I was relatively blind going into the movie, where the only bit of marketing I saw, I think may have been one of those original teasers where it was just kind of like women looking at the camera and seeming like a little bit startled. And that was it. Like, I don't even know if it had the title attached to it at the end, other than it had like weird music and kind of like slow motion shots of women looking at the camera. So it certainly piqued my interest, and it was the sort of thing where I was definitely looking forward to checking it out, even when kind of the mixed reviews started flooding in earlier this week. So is Osgood Perkins' latest a keeper? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
Can I trust this man?
Can I trust this woman? I love you.
This place isn't right.
I'm worried about you.
You say that to all the girls?
Boom!
Keeper was directed by Osgood Perkins and written by Nick Leppard, and the story is as follows. A romantic one-year anniversary trip to a secluded cabin turns sinister when a dark presence reveals itself, forcing a couple to confront the property's haunted past. Now here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Keeper?
I mean, I have thoughts. I have lots of thoughts.
Okay.
First of all, I'll say I didn't realize till after I left the theater. Written by the Dangerous Animals guy. This is his.
Oh, okay.
That's who it is. Also, didn't realize that guy was Canadian. I don't know if when we did Dangerous Animals, we recognized that, but I
don't remember mentioning that. Yeah.
No, I don't think it came up. So he must have changed his bio, like that came up on Letterboxd. But when I clicked on it, it was like Canadian writer of Dangerous Animals. But yeah, so I think a conversation when we did the monkey, I should have went back and listened, but whether we had it on the episode or maybe behind the scenes, I think one of the conversations was, should Osgood Perkins kind of stick to movies that he's written and not necessarily adapting other people's work. And, I think like overall there's some good bare bones to this. It's obviously like very influenced by, I'd say, like A24 folk horror, that kind of thing. It's very reminiscent of things we've seen already, I think, in some movies, or invoking feelings of movies that have already come out. But just like there was something, I know Osgood Perkins and them, they want you to think there's something off in this movie, but like there's like something actually off about this movie. Like the story seemed kind of half baked. I'm always complaining about like your movie should be short, and then when they give you a short movie, like, this isn't a long movie, this is only, it's like an hour and 38 minutes or 40 minutes or something. And I don't know about you, but like I probably twice checked my phone where I was like, I felt like I had been there for like 4 hours, and I was like, it's just like really insane. And then aesthetically for this, I was kind of surprised it didn't look like an Osgood Perkins movie. Like he has like a very refined style, like he, the way he directs, like the actual cinematography of it, like everything's a lot of angles, a lot of stuff like that, which there is some in this, but it's just like everything just seemed very different than anything else he's ever done. And I don't know about you, I just kept getting the feeling of like, this feels like a director for hire job.
Oh.
I'm curious, like, did you have these feelings that it was just like, there's something off about like the overall product that's being given here?
I would say there are things off in the movie, but I wouldn't actually point towards the presentation. One of the few things I do like about this movie, like wholeheartedly, I could say is probably like the shot composition or the use of crossfades, which obviously it is so gratuitous, but once you understand what the movie's fully about, it kind of does make a little bit of a sense to have all these faces like crossfading onto one another and having moments of horror or kind of seeing things through the image bubble to the surface. So I liked it stylistically in that regard. I will say that it's a very bare bones movie. We have all seen this sort of a couple goes to the cabin in the woods for a romantic getaway. And even more recently, we have seen aspects of this movie in like Fresh, which keeps coming up on the show, weirdly enough, again. But as I was watching this, I was like, oh, I'm getting like shades of Fresh. There was like shades of Together in this because it's based on like a relationship. There was shades of basically a bunch of different A24 horror movies just in terms of the revelations in the third act and whether or not that really relates to folk horror, whether it relates to an entity or whether it relates to, just a metaphor. It was the sort of thing where it felt very much of like that quote unquote elevated horror genre. I will say that the movie for me did have a pretty good sense of tension for a lot of it. A lot of this movie is basically Tatiana Maslany in a house by herself, just listening to creaks and, groans and, weird noises. And it did hold my attention. Now, is that because I saw this right after Die My Love, which was incredibly arduous to sit through? Like, or was I just kind of more into this than I would have expected, or that like critical consensus would lead? I don't know. This like felt like a Marvel movie to me, like how exciting it was compared to what I saw like 30 minutes before it. So it's kind of hard for me to talk about being bored. I certainly didn't check my phone. I will say that the way the narrative starts to shift, where the character misses some pretty obvious pieces of dialogue, or where I feel like Osgood Perkins is intentionally not letting the character dig into certain pieces of information or reveal certain pieces of information to the audience to make the story work, I thought kind of felt a little bit cheap, especially once we're getting into some of those third act revelations again. And I will say that there's a specific piece of licensed music that is used, I don't know, 4-5 times in this movie that I was just groaning because like lyrically it was so obvious what it was getting at, but it was just like, okay, everyone understood this the first time. Why do we think like it's going to be more poignant and important the fourth time? Like it's not incredibly deep. So did it feel like an Osgood Perkins movie to me? Kind of. I guess like that's the thing. It's like, in my opinion, like The Monkey feels so different from Longlegs, right? Like I understand what you're saying. Like Longlegs has this very squared off, like very angular, very like well composed shots, but The Monkey to me didn't feel that. That felt more of like a director to hire movie for me than like this. This felt a little bit more akin to Longlegs, just lesser in, you know, in the stylistic components, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I felt like it was like a filter or something, like just like a camera, like something they were doing with the camera, where to me Longlegs and The Monkey, they had like this, I don't know how to describe it, like almost like this polish to it. Like it's just like very, very modern, very, just like very polished, where I think it was probably intentional because, you know, where this is like set in a cabin in the woods, like it was all like, I felt like there was almost like a very like warm, fuzzy filter to this, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, because the other two movies I've seen of them, it's like very just kind of like high def, you know, like just very vivid and clear, where I was like, this is almost like dreamlike, cozy dreamlike, which, you know, I think does fit the theme. It was just kind of odd, and I think it's really funny that how much you were vibing with this, he said, just because like the entire time I was watching this, I was like, oh my god, Colton's not even gonna want to do this episode. He's gonna hate it so much.
Listen, I think this might get a little bit of a bump just because I don't want to keep dumping on Lynn Ramsey's new movie, Die My Love. It's just, I found that incredibly dull, like aggressively dull. So when I'm watching this, and like obviously Jennifer Lawrence, Robert Pattinson, they're great actors as well. It's just like in the movie, I just thought they didn't really have much of interest. At least for me in this, it was like, I was interested in Tatiana Maslany as the protagonist, whether or not she's going to survive, or whether or not she's going to get out of the cabin, or whether or not what she's going to discover in the cabin. I felt like the horror moments, even if it's just a jump scare or kind of like an unsettling visual, was doled out at like, I don't know, one every 15 minutes. That was enough. Like just when it was starting to lose me, they show something strange and I go, oh, okay, what's this? That it kept my attention long enough that it didn't lose me. I will say that once we got to the latter half of the movie, and specifically towards the ending, I completely understand why this movie is divisive. And I don't want to talk about it too much right now in the spoiler-free section, but even though I didn't completely hate it or what it was going for, it also didn't completely work either. And it's, I'll leave it at that, I guess.
I kind of feel that I'm making it kind of sound, I think, worse than I had. Because I didn't have a bad experience with this, but I think it's interesting because I think a lot of the issues I had, like you, with that kind of third act is very similar to the issues I had around Dangerous Animals, where I just felt like I really like the concept. I like what it's cooking, but it just it can't get there. That last act, it just kind of like drops the ball. And to me, like, it's this weird dichotomy of the movie felt really long, But in that third act, I was like, it felt like we were just like rushing everything. And it's like, all right, we got to kind of wrap this up. Where I was like, well, hold on a second. Like, where we're going, like, horror-wise and just kind of bizarre-wise, it's like, I kind of want to, like, explore this. I'm kind of interested in this now. But then it's like, well, you know, we only have 10 minutes left. So we kind of got to get this through. And like you said, obviously, Tatiana is, like, amazing. She's good in everything. It's crazy how good she is just in everything. That includes She-Hulk.
Yeah, she's the main reason why anyone should watch this movie. Just because even though, once again, there are some leaps in logic or some parts where she has to intentionally ignore what somebody's saying in order for the plot to continue. Like, essentially, she can't pick at something that somebody says.
Yeah.
She has to just either not hear it or be like, oh, that's cute, and just move on. She does sell it. She is very good in this movie. And, you know, we'll get into more in the spoiler discussion, but she goes to some weird lengths. And I think even though there's a lot of notes in this movie that to me rung false by the end of it, I don't think her performance or Tatiana was like the blame with any of it. She was consistently great in a movie that, you know, wasn't consistently great or even rarely great in any semblance of the word.
Yeah, the only, like, the issue I did have acting-wise is I wasn't big on Rossif Sutherland, who plays Malcolm, and it was just simply, like, I just didn't feel, like, any chemistry between them.
I agree.
So, and I kind of get, especially as we get the reveals of, like, kind of why he's, you know, a little more reserved and you know, kind of odd and stuff. But yeah, it was like their personalities in clash. I was just like, I don't really understand how you guys are like this couple that seems to be like thriving because you're going on this like 1 year trip and it's supposed to be a big deal and all that. I was just like, I don't really understand, and especially, like, even your actions before anything gets real weird, it seems Liz would just kind of, like, be like, screw you, like, very early on in this relationship.
Yeah, it feels like a relationship where Liz, Tatiana Maslany's character, is very much settling or doesn't have, like, a high opinion of herself. Because if Rossif Sutherland was more like Sebastian Stan's character in Fresh, you know, we would all understand like how she got herself in this predicament or
like,
why
cut
she's
our
even
limbs
in
off,
this 1 year.
please.
Yeah, exactly. Why we're in this 1 year relationship. But what we see here, I agree. I didn't really get any chemistry between the two. I don't think there's even really any intimate scenes between them, even though it's like an anniversary. So maybe some of that is just literally the movie didn't let us buy into the relationship. But yeah, I thought he was just a little bit too stoic, a little bit too stern, and just kind of cold for selling this sort of movie, like what we had to buy into there.
I did really like Burkett Turton though, who plays like the cousin Darren. I thought he was.
Oh, you liked him?
I mean, that's a hard role to play. Like, he's supposed to be someone you just absolutely hate, and I thought
fair.
I thought he did a pretty good job because I was just like, man, this guy's super annoying, and I mean that's what he was meant to do. I thought that was pretty good. I do agree with you. I wish there was maybe some different song choices. I don't know what's going on. Like, does Malcolm only own one vinyl? He's only got, well, he obviously has two because, you know, they tried to win me over a little bit. They had the Sam Cooke going, and I was like, oh shit, yeah, he's trying to get like a yay or a slay out of me. He's like, we got to play the Sam Cooke. But that, you know, you got the Sam Cooke song. Then no, we're just gonna go back to the other song, and like you said, just kind of pound it home for you. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll say is, which I have seen kind of other, I won't say like other people, but especially other kind of influencers talk about it that have, you know, like are reviewing it, stuff like that. I did heavily notice, because as someone who has been inundated with the trailers for this a lot, especially on YouTube, stuff like that. This is one of those movies that suffered, man. Like, I feel like YouTube, I feel like the trailers just, the more of trailers you watch, the more it kind of, I think they kind of gave away the bag right away in the trailer.
Okay.
I thought, you know, unlike remember how great Longlegs like promotion was through Neon? Neon just sharing images from this movie that pretty much just like, so there's no surprise when you go see it. I was kind of interested, like, just because the marketing was so different from what I saw from The Monkey and Longlegs. I thought maybe Neon just didn't know what to do with it necessarily to market it, to try to get people to go. Because, yeah, the marketing I didn't think was great, and I thought the marketing kind of gave too much away, which tells me they were worried that people wouldn't go.
Yeah, I didn't actually see any of the marketing because, like I said, I only saw that original trailer. But it certainly wasn't the sort of marketing that was impossible to ignore, like Longlegs or like a Shelby Oaks recently. They did like a lot of marketing for that movie. And when I was on Letterboxd, just kind of like adjusting my poster and the backdrop and all this sort of thing, there were definitely some very spoilery images from the third act that obviously it must have been in like a trailer or something in order for that to just be on Letterboxd readily available in high def. So I haven't gone back and watched the trailer, especially like with a new set of eyes after seeing the movie to see if they spoil it. But I'll take your word for it. And this is definitely a movie better left unspoiled, at least, you know. So there's some sort of tension for the first hour, just wondering what is on the go in this cabin.
Yeah.
But yeah, would you recommend people go and check this one out in theaters or?
Yeah, I'm going to say yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, I sounded a little down on it, but I'm still an Osgood Perkins guy. I mean, whether that's good or bad, I just bunch it together with my Blumhouse love. It's like Osgood Perkins and Blumhouse. You know, I support what he does. You know, I think, as I said, I think the conversations are still going to continue on of whether he's deserving to be up there with like the Peels and the Eggers and all, you know, those people that I think he kind of involved with. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's real nepotism there in terms of horror nepotism, that he's there. But, you know, I'm interested in what he does. And I think it's very interesting, as you brought up, that these three latest films have been so different tonally, which I think is like very interesting because his contemporaries, so many of their movies have like themes that are very similar, or like there's some connective tissue to them where, I don't know, there's just something that makes me excited where I'm like, I can't put my finger on what he's gonna do because he's just kind of this chameleon doing all these different kind of genres of horror. So you know what, I think it could give you a good time in the movies. I think I really thought seeing this, if you weren't scared away a couple years ago when you went and saw Men, I think, like, if that's that kind of folk horror-ish stuff is your vibe, I think you would vibe with this a bit. So, yeah, I think I would recommend it. What about you?
Gosh, I'm really going back and forth on this. I think I'll say go ahead and check it out in theaters. But also, if you wait for streaming, I don't think it's a huge loss, is what I'll say. Osgood Perkins is one of those filmmakers that I think I admire him more than I actually enjoy his movies. Like, I have kind of this natural revulsion where you say, like, people are kind of putting him up as one of the masters of horror.
Yeah.
I'm like, not yet. I don't think he's made a movie that I would genuinely say is, like, great or amazing. Like, Longlegs I enjoyed. Monkey I didn't really enjoy. And this one, I probably marginally enjoyed it more than The Monkey, but it's also a lot messier of a movie in a lot of respects, which we'll get into shortly. But yeah, this is something I would recommend mostly just for people to kind of go and give money to a movie that stars Tatiana Maslany so she can get more, you know, bigger roles and better roles, because she is, even though everyone kind of acknowledges that she's a great actress, I find that she actually doesn't get a lot of movies or a lot of screen time in a lot of movies to really like showcase her talents. So it's the sort of thing where I would just like this movie to do better as a whole. And I don't think it's as bad as what the critical reception might lead you to believe. I do think there's a very strong chance that you just fundamentally, like, absolutely hate the ending, especially if you're just a normie critic that goes to see everything. Like, you're having to go see The Running Man in the same weekend as you see this, you know? I can understand why one is, you know, a lot easier to palate or a lot easier to kind of just sit through and enjoy. But I don't think if you check this out in theaters, you'll have a bad time per se. It's just also like not a great loss if you just wait for it to be on streaming. So it seems like both of us will recommend you check this out in theaters. And with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Keeper. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Keeper, so if you've not seen Keeper, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, is there anything specific you want to start with in the spoiler-filled section?
I'll just kind of finish off kind of a point I brought up in the spoiler-free section that I couldn't fully go into. So basically, you know, I was talking about the marketing of this, like the Instagram, stuff like that. And I was saying, like, you know, they basically show these children, these creatures, and it's in the later trailers, like, especially the scene where she's, like, falling from the pipe outside the house and she looks up and you're like, you see the shadow of them looking down.
Peering over the edge, yeah.
So, you know, it was kind of one of those things where I did... It's like before I'm like on my way to the theater, like I'm in the parking lot. I'm like, all right, I gotta go in. I'm just looking at Instagram, like neon, you know, the FBI, they've tracked me. They know what to give me for ads because I'm sitting in the parking lot of the theater. So of course I get like neon popped up on my thing, and you know, it's Keeper, and it's like that is the image. It's like showing me, and it's like, okay, well, I automatically know now that there's going to be like some sort of creatures or something.
The movie is significantly less interesting if you know that going in as well. Because when I was watching it, and once again, I don't think the movie fully makes sense with this explanation either, because there's moments such as in the tub where there's the breath on the window behind her and there isn't like any creature or long neck or stretching or anything around that's able to make the heart appear on the glass without anyone touching it, right? So the movie isn't internally consistent with this stuff. But when you're watching it and you genuinely don't know, is there an entity in the house? Is there like somebody in the house? Is the partner just crazy? Is Tatiana Maslany drugged off this cake and losing her mind? Or is there actually, like, real creatures? It is a little bit more interesting. I will say that I don't think any of the explanations you could have kind of come and explained this movie would have been very satisfying. Other than for me, if it was like, and this is corny because it winds up being in, like, black phone territory, but I kind of liked the idea of the ex-lovers or the women that have been killed by this guy existing in the house as, like, this presence that was still malevolent. I did like that, and I liked the moments such as when the so-called woman pops up behind her with the bag on her head, right? I kind of would have liked a couple more instances of that, of like how he actually killed these women, and it kind of like that trauma seeping into like the main character. I would have liked maybe a few more examples of that. But what we go with, where it's like this flashback of them as children 200 years ago, killing essentially a gypsy lady in a creek, and it being bearing a strong resemblance to Tatiana Maslany's character, and her basically being like reincarnated all these years later, and you know, her having like a cursed brood of children. Yeah, I don't know if that worked too well for me. I did find them a little unsettling in the cellar when she's down there and you get like the first one kind of gasp.
So I really like them. I like the design of them. Even like I feel like some people are, especially like the long neck one, are going to be like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is silly. But I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool. They weren't like anything I've ever seen before. So I kind of like respected that. I thought some of them kind of resembled like the creature from Oddity, except just like a little more clown-esque. You know, they seem to have like some funny flares going on their collars.
Yeah.
And
there's one that was kind of like smoking as well, like out of his ears or out of his mouth or something. Yeah, I think the main one that when you're in the cellar, you kind of, it's like the white face appears on the right side of the screen really quickly with like a gasp. I thought that was pretty good. And then when the one comes up and takes the bag off her head, and it's like all the different faces of all these pained women, and they're all like screaming and whatnot, I thought that was pretty unsettling, even though it wasn't the greatest like visual effects wise. But I liked it conceptually, or at least the designs.
Yeah.
It just wound up showing it too much and then also over explaining everything. And I also think like one main one and maybe one or two smaller ones would have been enough. I don't know if we needed like half a dozen of them, I don't know if we needed like a whole, family of children in this basement. I also think he did a pretty good job of putting them throughout the movie and not exactly tipping your hand unless you've seen it on Instagram, like exactly what it was. Like, for example, there's that character who gets kind of pulled up into the tree, and it's a really low angle shot, and she's kind of hiding behind the tree, and all you kind of see is something move, and then she starts flying up the tree. And I was like, oh, okay, there's some weird creature attacking people from the trees.
I thought it was like
weird.
A plant or a tree eating her. I was like, what is going on here?
I thought it was like, I don't know. I thought it was like some like long-armed creature that would be like up in the rafters in the house grabbing people. And especially like when the cousin comes in, and this was really poorly shot by Osgood, I have to say, but where the cousin dies off screen and then you kind of see just like the shadow of his body where his head's kind of stretched out.
Yeah.
I thought that was like very hard to even make out what it was or, any specificity there for it to be effective. But that, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, there's something in the rafters grabbing people. And it's just like, what a strange explanation for where this is going. But there was that. There was like, there was a couple of times where they were just behind her, like in kind of in the silhouette of like the shadow in the room, or quite literally she'd move past the camera, and as she moves for like a second there'd be one standing there, or obviously in the background out of focus, like the long neck stretching out. Like I liked all that stuff. I thought it was pretty cool, even though it was doled out at a pretty slow pace of getting something like that maybe every 15 minutes.
Yeah, I thought that worked pretty good. They did a pretty good job. Like, I will say, because obviously, just because I saw the pictures, I didn't realize, I didn't look into it any more than that, so I didn't know really what was going on. But I thought they did a good job with, like, especially when the cousin comes in and, like, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, he's, like, looking for something. Like, he's checking around and, looking at the ceiling, doing all that stuff. I think I thought it was really fun, but I thought it was quite a twist in the third, because I remember I think it was like the second kind of trailer they cut for this. I didn't know how they were going to spin it, because I remember the second trailer I saw for it, they kind of played two trailers at once, like one after another, where one is like, it's the guy, and it's like, and then the trailer makes it seem like this guy's holding this girl hostage and like something crazy's going on, but then they play another trailer where it's like all the same stuff, but then I forget, like, the wording and stuff is like, or is it the girl that is like crazy and like keeping the guy hostage and stuff like that. So of course going into it, I was like, they do a lot of stuff where you're like, oh, maybe she's not well. And unfortunately, it's like none of the above. We're just gonna go real nuts in the third act there, which I kind of appreciated, I guess. Like I said, it was a swing, and I think, like you said, it was stuff like the window where there's like a breath, and the heart drawn, giving me Night House vibes.
Yeah,
and to me, I think that's what almost cheapened it in a way, though, is it's kind of like they had all these different ideas of like creatures, like witchcraft, magic, like, and then they kind of just throw it all in. It's like, well, we have these creatures that are magic, and there seems to be like also maybe like some like satanic stuff, like stuff going on. This gypsy woman obviously, is dabbling in something, that she's having these like demon children or whatever. And I was just like, it seems to me like maybe when Buddy was writing it, he didn't really know what these things were, and it was like, well, I need to do all these creepy things in the house, and I want to throw people off, so it could be any of these different scenarios, and we'll just see what works.
Yeah, definitely a case where they threw everything at the wall and just kind of made everything stick. So really nothing is all that satisfying or completely explained. But even outside of the third act revelations, just some of the writing or some of the character logic didn't make much sense to me. There's at least 2 instances where Malcolm mentions that the children are going to be disappointed or the children are going to miss you. And there's no like setup of this being a joke or a recurring gag or like basically, oh, they're trying to have kids and there's some weird, cute reason. He mentions just straight up something to do with the children a couple of times and she doesn't like question it. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't react. Where it's just kind of like, oh, this guy is saying weird shit for the camera more so than anything. It's like clearly like he's just talking to the audience, and Tatiana Maslany, even though she was conversing with him a second later or a second before, is now just ignoring this weird turn of phrase. Or even more so, I really didn't like the moment where he can't remember who Mrs. Portnoy is.
Yeah.
And that being like the catalyst of like unraveling their relationship at that moment, because he had the foresight to kind of set it up early in the day that, oh, okay, there's this patient that is going to be brought out of a medically induced coma, and he's not sure if she's going to be fine. And then he brings it up around lunchtime as a reason to leave. And then when he returns some like 4 hours later, he doesn't remember who Mrs. Portnoy is after there was like all this drama and back and forth and discussions in the relationship about her being left alone and all this stuff. That note to me just really rung false. And it was like one of those conveniences that it very much took me out of the movie, even more than having weird demonic children in the third act. You know, it was the sort of thing where I was just like, this is a really dumb piece of character writing that it just very much felt false to me. Similarly, so stuff like the cousin's date coming in and telling her like explicitly like not to eat the cake, and the cake tastes like shit anyways. And then Tatiana Maslany just being like, "Yo, I'm gonna have some cake" as soon as he brings it to her. Right? I was just like, what? Like, this is just strange. Or there's the moment in the third act where she falls into the river and she seemingly seems to be escaping, but then we cut back to her and she's in the basement. And I was kind of like, how did she get to the basement? Why is she in the basement? Was all that in her head? What is this? How did this happen? Like, she didn't seem wet or drenched or anything.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't get that. I kind of assumed that the like monster children got her out of the river, but yeah, I was like, she's not wet, so that's kind of weird. And especially when you have the rest of this movie where like there's a lot of hallucination stuff.
Exactly. This is the sort of movie where it does get a little surreal, and especially with all the crossfading and the kind of this point of the movie being just that to Malcolm, all these women are the same. They're a means to an end. He doesn't really care for them. They're basically a way to like prolong his life. And it's basically like going through this guy's dating history, and no one's really all that special other than that he murdered them and they helped him get to where he is. So I like the cross fading throughout the movie with that in mind, just where the faces are kind of blending together. Sometimes like a mouth is blending into someone's eye, or sometimes there's like shots of the water and it all like refracting and kind of changing the faces. I like that sort of stuff throughout the movie, but when we kind of get to this section, I don't know if it really made a whole lot of sense, or at least it wasn't satisfying to me.
Yeah, and like the cake, I kind of, like cool visual, I guess, just her gnawing into that cake when she's just obviously like tripping balls, but like they didn't explain what the cake is for, like other than
it seemed to have like some piece of human or something in it. I don't know. It was like bloody viscera in there at least.
Yeah, or it's made to look like that, but like other than you're like, okay, well, maybe she's tripping out on this cake or whatever, but it's like there's no explanation of why they bring it, like why she has to eat it. Obviously, every woman has done this ritual, so I would have liked to know more about the ritual. Like, okay, so why do they bring the cake? Why do they have to eat the cake? Like,
the cake seemed to have drugs in it. That's what I understand, because He says something to the effect of like, I knew you were special once you ate the cake and you were fine afterwards, which I don't know why, unless you go like the level beyond and basically be like, she is special. She is like preordained to be here. The children know it's her from 200 years ago. Like, I don't know really. There's nothing in the logic of the movie that would basically have this character of Liz just be unaffected by drugs in the cake, other than
Yeah.
Once again, just going, well, this is out there. It's not even logical anymore. It's just, fate, which I don't know. It's not a great mark on the movie when so many things are kind of decided by coincidence or by people just ignoring, a locket in the river that has literally
a picture
you in it. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, I see this locket. I am marginally upset by it. And then I never address it until the third act of the movie, which once again, there's all these little pieces that to me just kind of make for a clunky story. But somehow still, I was at least interested for a lot of it to see where it was going to go. I don't think I would watch this a second time and enjoy it very much. But on a first watch, truly, where I didn't know where it was going and I didn't even know about these children and how strange it was going to get, it did hold my attention, at least for, the 90 minutes or whatever it is. But with that said, I don't know if there's too much left to discuss in the spoiler-filled section.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I was going to say, just kind of off what you were saying, I don't know why, but I was, on the drive home, I was thinking about Annihilation, and I was thinking about, in The Shimmer, about how it kind of recreates things and it kind of gets the idea of things, but it's not really that thing. And that's kind of how I feel about the story of this, is I'm like, it's like this guy, really likes folk horror, and it's like he's kind of got these bases of folk horror, but it's just not overly thought out anywhere necessarily. It's just a facade of folk horror, but there's nothing really deep in it. It's just the outside of a folk horror. And I feel that's kind of, that was just kind of my only real complaint about it.
Yeah, it's another one of those horror movies where they set up a bunch of red herrings throughout the course of the movie, but then once they explain what the source of the horror was, it doesn't really make sense in retrospect.
Yeah.
It's one of those that it's great for trailers probably because you can actually create a bunch of scares, but it just, in the logic of the world, it doesn't make much sense. And the movie is so surreal and strange and hypnotic in a lot of ways that, maybe it doesn't even make sense to apply logic to it, but it was just, it's hard for me not to when I'm watching something like this. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. Rowan, what would you give Keeper?
So I think I'm going to give it a high okay for me. I'd probably watch this a second time just to check it out. And I did like it. I didn't love it. Kind of unlike you were saying, I think I like Longlegs and the Monkey better than I like this. I like some of the imagery. I like some of the ideas. I did like the monster design. We didn't bring it up, but the very ending where, she puts them in the whatever that is, honey or something like that.
Amber or something. Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, for some reason, ever since the marketing, I thought this was going to have something to do with bees or honey or beekeepers. There was no Jason Statham in it. That's a point docked off of it. I didn't tie into that universe. So, I mean, yeah, that was kind of disappointing. But yeah, no, I had a good time watching this. There was just so many threads that I was interested in exploring more or wanted more detail on. And like I said, I felt like there was just something a little hollow about it. Maybe the script needed another pass or two to tighten things up and explain things some more. And as you brought up, there was definitely some scenes where I was like, this isn't how humans interact with each other or talk to each other or, people in relationships or anything like that. And I probably would have liked to see that be a more naturalistic thing. But yeah, I think a high okay. I did have a good time with it, and I want to check it out again. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, we're on the same page with this one. I'm going to land on an okay for it as well. But I will say, I think I slightly preferred it over The Monkey just because this is kind of more my vibe and what I look for in a horror movie. Stylistically, I thought a lot of it looked pretty good. Like I said, the crossfades worked for me, and the shot composition I thought was interesting, especially where a lot of the shots were low angles, kind of looking up almost at the ceilings and the rafters and stuff. It was just an interesting way to frame the characters, especially when one of the first pieces of horror involved someone getting like ripped up into the trees, overhead. That it kept me on edge. I thought the tension as well throughout it was very well developed, and as someone who lives alone, just the idea of seeing a character kind of creep around the house with every creak, and the house kind of settling, and it, whether or not that's just the wind or whether or not that's something in the house, I thought it was pretty effective at doing that as well. And as we've mentioned numerous times, Tatiana Maslany absolutely sells everything that she's given. And even though I don't think a lot of the movie makes internal logic, or it's not internally consistent throughout it, and I think it kind of grasps at straws to bring the third act together. I did like some of the aspects of the third act. I just think you probably could have pulled back a little bit, never didn't over explain everything as much and show it as much. And similarly, that final shot, I think it's a very well-composed final shot, but kind of the discussion and the back and forth and the old age makeup, and the contact lenses on Tatiana, making her eyes black or purple and all this stuff. It was just, once again, kind of like a bridge too far. You could have pulled back by 20%, and I think it would have been more effective. But that's kind of what Osgood Perkins does here. He goes full hog into some of these weird territory, some of this surrealist imagery, and over explaining, and I think it makes the movie weaker for it. So yeah, it's gonna be an okay from me as well. And if you're not following us on our socials already, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Blue Sky, TikTok. I don't even know if all those social platforms are still in existence, but if there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Mark, Steven, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and James, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams, hosted by Jill, and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, are you going to put that one song on the playlist? We listened to it 4 or 5 times throughout the runtime.
I should put it 4 or 5 times in a row on the playlist. Oof. So you just have to listen to it over and over again. Well, you can find out if I put it on there 5 times by going to Spotify, going to It Slays Podcast Horrific Playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned. Go into the bio, click the Linktree link, and there's a button that'll take you directly there. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So follow it. We update it regularly, and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, I don't know if there's any big horror releases coming out for the rest of November. I know early December we have Five Nights at Freddy's 2.
Oh yeah.
Which, we're all heavily anticipating that one. Emma Tammy returns for Five Nights at Freddy's 2.
I'm taking a look. I made a little list here, and that one, I'm not gonna lie, Colton, I'm kind of interested in The Carpenter's Son.
Oh, is that the horror Jesus movie?
Yeah, it's been getting some good reviews, so...
Huh.
Nick Cage.
Is that actually doing theatrical release, or is that just like a Shudder thing?
I have no idea.
So yeah, whether it's The Carpenter's Son or Five Nights at Freddy's 2 or something else entirely that we don't know about yet.
What a double feature.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would be iconic. That would be good. Maybe we'll have to do that. But with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.